All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Exceed. This is Gearface, a perennial Exceed newbie, here to learn another character at the foot of Reggie. Reggie, thank you so much for being here again.
The foot of me would be really low, considering I'm the shortest person. So like
Right.
even that's you're stooping.
We'll construct a huge statue of you and then meditate at the foot of
Oh,
that, if that works for you.
that's all I ever want.
All
That's
right,
all I
perfect.
ever want.
Now, Reggie, last time you were on the show, you were disparaging of my pop cultural and film knowledge. So I want to take the opportunity here to mention this is only for Reggie viewers at home. Please stop paying attention here. That today we're covering Zato the Blind Swordsman, portrayed by Beat Takeshi, and his best friend the Babadook. Um,
Yep,
but yeah,
yep.
yeah, I've seen
You,
movies, Reggie.
you did a good job. I would like to clarify, it wasn't just in the last episode.
Oh yeah, you've been
The
disparaging
last
of me this whole
episode was
time.
when it started, and then it
Yeah,
it hasn't stopped.
good, and I hope it doesn't. All
It
right,
won't.
uh, viewer, come on back. We're done. I'll put a timestamp when we stop uh, bantering with each other and get back to the lesson. Today we're covering Zato and Eddie. Um, Super excited to learn about these guys. I know very little about them except a little bit about, I guess, how they play in Strive, but really excited to have an expert here to teach me. Um, Quick disclaimer, as always, before we get started. Number one, we talk about playing to win on this show. That's not the only way to play Exceed. Exceed can be played for fun. You should play it for fun. It's fun that way. Um, you'll play more. You'll learn more in the long term. Please play for fun. And if the lines that we describe are not fun, don't play those lines. Please play the way that you want to play. Number two, typically we are talking about strategy in pretty prescriptive ways on this show. You'll hear people say
Typically,
things. Go ahead, Reggie.
I was just gonna say, typically we are prescriptive. It's a
Yes.
very, like sometimes, all the time.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Half the time we're always right. Um, you're going to
Mm,
hear Reggie say things like "always do this, never do that," or even "usually do this, usually do that." Exceed's not a solved game. Reggie is an informed opinion. I'm a less informed opinion. So take our words with a grain of salt. Develop your own lines of play, especially with a character like Zato, who has not actually been released yet. Uh, there's still plenty of room to develop this character. So if we missed something or if we underrepresented something, first of all, it's Reggie's fault and not mine. Second of all, uh,
it this
good.
is untrue. He brought me here. I'm but a humble journeyman.
Everything that
He picked the
happens,
wrong person.
everything that happens on this show is my responsibility. That's true. Um, if we do get something wrong or if we do underrepresent something, let us know. Turn this into a conversation. But yeah, that is all of the bookkeeping out of the way. Reggie, tell me about Zato.
Before I tell you about Zato, I do have an apology to make and a statement for this one.
Okay.
Apology and statement. I noticed when I was watching the last video I was on, which is the Happy Chaos one, that I moved the cursor around a lot. Like,
Mhm.
not just pointing at things, I just move it around. So if
You,
that's distracting to you, yeah, I do that
mhm.
all the time. If that's distracting, sorry, folks. I just can't sit still, even in a digital tabletop.
It's all
Uh,
good.
but yeah, so Zato is the puppet character of season 7. He does things to make his buddy Eddie go onto the board, and then his buddy Eddie on the board lets him threaten things from ranges that you would not be able to threaten them from.
Right.
That's the broadest overview I could give you. Now, I would consider Zato and Eddie to be a bit of a snowball character. When they get one advantage, they can turn it into multiple advantages and then keep pushing that down the line. That's how I consider. So, whether that is using Eddie to advantage chain or to zone, whichever works for you, but that is how I have seen success with Zato. So we'll start with the character ability and then we'll go from there. So
Sounds
his
good.
character ability is really simple. Eddie begins out of play, so he's not on the board to start the game. And then your normals have after you may place Eddie in a space within this attack's range. Since it's an after trigger, that means it can go before or after any other after triggers. You can order them in any order. So cross gives you a million different places you can put him.
So you could hit with cross or strike with cross. Uh,
Yep,
put Eddie within one or two spaces of you in either direction, even
yep,
underneath your opponent, or you
yep,
could strike with cross, back up three, and then do the same thing in your new position.
correct.
Okay, gotcha.
Um, there is another card in a boost in the kit that can make that sort of thing more viable, like more general. But we'll get to that when we get to that.
Okay,
And then when you exceed, it's just a 2-cost exceed, and it's just the only upgrade is you're not limited to the spaces within your attack's range. It's just anywhere.
okay,
Um, I find this more useful in a game when you have a lot of distance between you and your opponent. If you are zoning your opponent, the the normals, you're not going to be able to place Eddie as close, right? Because, you know, 1 to 2, if the opponent's at range 6,
right,
is not as helpful.
right.
But
And
if you just,
if you're trying to keep them consistently at range six rather than
yeah,
just like for one or two turns, okay, you might want to exceed.
yep. It also allows you to place Eddie with block, which is a thing you can't normally do.
Right, because there's no range on block.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So, relatively simple ability. We should probably learn what Eddie does.
Yeah.
Eddie has, while Eddie is in play, your specials and ultras calculate range from Eddie and have hit gain advantage. And hit gain advantage and clean up, remove Eddie from play. I never realized how awkward reading that is. There's two ands in it.
Yep. We'll we'll
I
take
it,
it we'll take it up with the layout and the templating people. They'll
that
they'll
was
write us
that
they'll
was
write a stern
me.
email. Well,
Um.
I'll take it up with you, Reggie.
Yeah. So nothing changes when he exceeds. You know,
Okay.
Eddie is Eddie on both sides.
Right.
Um. He only has an effect when he is on the board, but that effect is range manipulation and gaining advantage,
Right.
giving that to your specials and ultras, which typically is a pretty powerful thing. Like I said, you can use that to chain advantage to snowball the opponent out of the game,
Right.
particularly because it is chaining advantage at range.
When
Now, there's
they
only a
can't they couldn't really do much. So they would have to spend their turn moving in to stop you from uh zoning them out, but you're not giving them a turn to do it.
yes, but there
Gotcha.
is an important part. Your specials and ultras have clean up, remove Eddie from play. So even if they don't hit, whatever you wild swing on defense and you get a special or ultra, Eddie is coming off the board.
Right.
So that does limit some of your ability to zone or to snowball zone like that.
Right.
There are ways around this. But that's fundamentally what he does. He puts Eddie on the board and then uses Eddie to threaten things that he wouldn't normally be able to threaten. Like if the
Gotcha.
opponent's at range 3, you can now threaten stuff at range 1 that, like your range 1 specials that you wouldn't normally be able to threaten from range 3. So
Sure. Yeah.
something like Pierce and Damned Fang.
Yeah. This thing becomes above curve at three.
Yeah,
Suddenly, just by virtue of having it extended range. So, couple of kind of rules questions here. Number
shoot.
one, um, so if Eddie's not on the board, your specials and normals aren't invalid or anything. They just come from Zato.
Specials and ultras, yeah, they just come from Zato.
Okay. And
Yeah,
as you said, like some of these might look a lot less impressive when they're not being used as zoning things, but I'm sure we'll get into that. And then,
yeah.
so hang on. Your specials and ultras calculate range from Eddie. have hit, gain advantage, and then clean up. They leave the board. All right. So the way that this works in practice, this works on defense. So it doesn't. I don't have to initiate with this or anything. But Zato hits or attacks with a normal. Depending on what side I'm on, I put Eddie into a space as
Yep.
my after on that attack.
Yep.
Now the next strike, it's not nothing else is happening on this strike. I'm setting it up for later.
Yeah.
And then my opponent strikes into me, or I strike. Whatever happens, I hit with something. I hit with a special or ultra. It comes from Eddie. It hits. It gains advantage. Their attack goes off. The strike finishes. Cleanup happens. I remove Eddie from play.
Correct.
Gotcha.
There
Okay.
is one thing. It is may place Eddie in a space within this attack's range, which matters for two reasons. One is you only have specials and ultras, and they're coming in or whatever, and you don't want to put Eddie in an awkward position.
Right.
All right. Or he's already going to be in a good position. You don't have to move him.
Oh, sure.
So you don't.
So if I'm all the way over here and a while ago I put him over here and then I struck with grasp, I don't want to have to move him over here sometimes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. You could just be baiting out one of their options.
Right.
Strike with block at long range when you're in exceed mode.
Right.
But yeah.
So the game plan is to have Eddie on the board to threaten all of these attacks, and this changes the shape of his kit substantially. And my normals are there. They kind of take on an additional function now of not only are they good attacks that I should use to attack with, they're also my way or one of my ways of getting Eddie onto the board.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are set up,
Okay.
and it's the concept of grappler movement, using strikes to move as opposed to moving as an action,
Sure.
right?
Yeah. I'll dive in from range 6 as Zangief even though I'm not going to hit.
Move 3. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this is like the same concept but applied to strikes. You are, instead of taking a turn to set up, you're doing it within a strike.
Okay.
Platinum does something similar, It's action compression, but it requires a strike to occur.
Right. And luckily I can do it on defense as well, just like with Platinum. So my opponent striking into me also has to worry about the fact that by striking into me, they might have given me a turn to set up for my offense on my turn.
Yep.
Okay.
Because when you initiate your strike, unless you're gaining advantage, you are giving the opponent the turn to react to it. But
Right.
if you do it on defense, well then, that's free real estate. That's yours.
Now, and do you I guess it's a little bit different from Platinum. Who viewers at home, Reggie did a lesson with me on Platinum a little while ago. I guess it's a little bit different than Platinum because with her, there was like a resource cost associated with it. In this situation, it seems like it's more like if I have a really good normal to strike with, I'm going to strike with it because it's a good normal, and also I'll put Eddie down, and
Yeah,
then next turn, if they strike into me on defense, okay, well I'll respond with what I'm going to respond with, and it's going to move Eddie if I'll make that decision then. It's less
yeah,
about like all right, I need to save this strike on my turn, or I need to only set up Eddie on defense. Like that sounds like it's a little bit less important than it is with Platinum.
yeah, yeah. For Zato, if you've got EX sweep in hand and you're at range 1, that's EX sweep at range 1.
Right.
That's a powerful threat. Um, it's basically like any ability that gives extra value to normals. They're just good. You don't worry too much about it. You just play the normals when they're good, and then just get the extra value from it.
Right. And then before we get
I
into the specials and ultras,
Yep.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Reggie.
No, no, no. I was about to get onto that. So what?
Okay, yeah. So the only other thing is a little bit more about his exceed mode. Because you
Yep.
mentioned that this was especially useful when you are playing a very very zoner heavy game. Is the
Yep.
alternative just kind of playing with your normals as normal, and in that situation you wouldn't really want to exceed?
Yeah. So if you're sort of playing around ranges 3 to 4, which I find happens a reasonable amount with Zato, there's no real need to do it. He has a fair few force engage cost in his kit. He's got one very playable ultra and a very expensive ultra, but you know, he's got other places he can spend that gauge. It's not going to just sit in your gauge if you
Okay.
don't exceed.
Okay. And so in a situation in a matchup where he's being consistently kept at range 5 and 6 and actually needs to use Eddie way farther out than you would with regular normals, but otherwise it's not necessarily a super high priority to exceed.
Yeah,
Okay.
like it doesn't hurt. You can probably get value out of it even in closer matchups, but you can also get value out of those resources in other places. So
Right.
it's just a matter of evaluating what you need and when.
Okay.
Particularly because it's a turn off. He doesn't set Eddie on the board when he exceeds. He hasn't got any kicker or anything. So the turn you exceed, you need to have a good reason to do it, and you need to have a good way to respond when the opponent responds, basically. You're basically giving the opponent a turn.
Right. So maybe if Eddie's already on the board or something and I have or I just have a good slow normal to respond with if they're striking into me.
Yeah, if you've got a good grip or whatever, that's, that's whatever.
Right.
You can take the turn. But if you're
Yeah.
just taking the turn to exceed, that's be careful.
Right. And I guess one more question.
Yes.
Eddie on defense, the hit gain advantage isn't necessarily what I'd be using him for in that situation. Then it's more the range control that I can threaten an above curve option or something like that. But on offense, that's where I'm looking for the advantage chaining stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah. On
Okay.
defense, the bonus advantage isn't going to do you much, but there are cases where it does matter. Something like he has two cards that have the defenses to survive, not be stunned by assault. So in
Oh,
those
sure.
cases, being able to hit back and steal the advantage, that's useful. I
Right.
mean,
Okay.
they'd typically be a bit of a hard read, but you make those. The opponent's got no dives, no spikes, and they're striking from range 3. Well,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
And Eddie's in the right positions. But yeah, all right. So what should I start with? I'm going to start with the specials and move my way up to the ultras.
Sounds good.
So they are arranged in fastest to slowest because they are. Um, so his fastest special. So I should say he has an extra special. He has 6 specials as opposed to 5, so he has a 32 card deck, which means he has more options, but you're also less likely to see any particular option.
Right.
That is a consideration. Um, you know,
So his
the odds of you,
his wild swings might be a little bit less consistent than most characters, or you might have to dig a little bit deeper into your deck with a change cards action to find the thing that you need.
yep. But and his wild swings can be very inconsistent because if Eddie's on the board,
Right.
yeah. So I don't want to say you don't want to be wild swinging the Zato because wild swinging is a powerful defensive option,
Right.
but consider what the setup is and what it would be sacrificing if it does go poorly.
Sure.
So let's start with Piss. So range 1, 3 speed, 3 power, 6 speed with hit, push or pull 1, and after if the opponent is stunned, draw 2. So it's a honestly pretty mediocre card as printed.
Yep.
Uh,
It's a mid
you
speed
know
that doesn't
the
beat anything slow.
Yeah, correct. It beats basically other. It's more like a bad slow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because it probably doesn't stun your mid speeds. It only beats fasts that are slower than it, unless you have Eddie set up. You have Eddie at
How about
3.
how about we do something like this here? Let's I have a feeling we're going to be doing things like this a lot. So let's move this off the board and we can
Yeah.
we can play with some
Yeah.
board states here for all these attacks.
Yeah. All right. So say you've got Eddie at 3. Suddenly, this attack is above curve and it has push or pull 1.
Yep.
So already, you know, if your opponent has like things that are borderline on range, like say Ryu plays Tatsu, you don't stun it, but you can push it out so it misses.
Right.
Yeah. Um, and then also, there are other cards in the kit that are slower tools that playing that can be baited out, that can bait out things that Pierce will beat,
Okay.
which means the draw two can come up then. It's also just useful to have another fast tool to close out games. The opponent is out of grasps. They don't have anything faster if you initiate most
Even
of the
if
time.
even if Zato isn't on the board, you're at range one and you're looking at a 3 life opponent, and you're like, well, this is my fastest thing.
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
extra 6 speed option.
Okay.
Yep, that's always nice.
Okay.
The boost
So,
on it is, yep, go.
oh, even in a position like this, where
Yeah,
you're at range 3 from your opponent, this actually like even just being able to push one. Now we're dodging sweeps. Like we actually, or we're pulling them in. Like it's not it's not necessarily like a range 4 play. It's a
no,
range kind of whatever I need it to be played. But the closer in I am, it seems
less
like,
reliable.
yeah. Like maybe here, well, I mean, here you dodge a spike. It seems like it's versatile because you can pull as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, it depends on the opponent's kit and what their options are. Like in this situation, it beats Donkey Kick from Ryu,
Yep.
which you know never hurts.
Yep.
And it's on curve there, and it's on curve gaining advantage. So even ignoring the other qualities of the attack, on curve gain advantage is rarely something to be upset about. Like that's what Assault does.
Yeah. That basically says I take the other turn unless you have a specific thing that stops me from taking it.
Yeah, and a lot of the times those things, you can mess about with,
Yeah.
you know, with his range positioning.
Okay. So
Um,
this is like a disruption option. This is messes with their plans a lot.
yeah,
Okay.
and you can just sort of throw it out. Like it's a card you can be pretty confident. If Eddie is next to the opponent, if you throw out a strike, they have to have very specific things to beat Pierce.
Okay.
Because otherwise it's, 6 speed and it's gonna hit them for 3 and then control positioning and possibly draw you 2. It's the draw 2 is very win more,
Mhm.
obviously. It's
Right.
if the opponent's stunned. But sometimes that's worth it. Sometimes that's fine.
Makes sense.
Um, the boost on it is a cancelable boost. It's indicated by the clock and gauge.
Mhm.
Uh, it still in the dark, +1 power. Now you may push 1. So if you initiate a strike and then you place Eddie, the opponent has the next turn. They look at your cards and go, wait a second. Quite a lot of these cards don't work if I stand on Eddie.
On top of Eddie, sure.
You can go, okay, I will be still in the dark and push 1, and then you can cancel if you wish, or you can make them come in, make them spend resources. Or maybe they're not on top of Eddie, but you want to make some distance anyway. You're at range 2 and you want to make it range 3. There you go.
Right. While also
It,
having power and the ability to strike if you want to afterward.
yeah, it's now you may push 1 is not quite as good as now you may move 1, but it's space management to some degree, which
Right.
you should never be, and force efficient space management. It's one force to control distance 1, and it's getting you power, so it's already better than if you just took the move action for 1.
Right. Is the stuff that you were saying earlier about Pierce being in something that beats the things that the other things in your kit can bait out? Is that an important enough consideration that I should be a little bit careful playing Still in the Dark in order to maintain the threat of Pierce so that they don't just play into
S-
the rest of my kit?
That so that there's only a few things if you have proper spacing and positioning that actually beat the other things. Like it's very character specific sort of stuff. Like Ryu has his crit Hadoken sort of thing,
Right.
which loses to Pierce, but then would beat a lot of the other stuff in the kit. If stuff like that exists, you got to work around it.
Okay. Gotcha. So
But
so so Pierce is your I can't deal with your character specific stuff card, but this probably deals with it or helps deal with it.
yeah,
Still in the Dark is for when you don't have to worry about that and you don't need Pierce anymore.
there is also a point. Um, I will jump to this early because I think it is very important when evaluating the rest of the kit. Um, there's a boost on one of these ultras called Let Me Carve Your Way, boost on Sun Void. 1 power, now you may spend 2 force. If you do, return 2 specials from your discard to your hand.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry too hard about keeping threats live all the time because you have access to a card that allows you to return them.
Right.
So, or you say you hit with both copies of Pierce and they're in your gauge, you can spend them. You can spend them as the force for Let Me Carve Your Way. They are now in your
They're now
discard.
in your
You can
discard
return
pile.
them.
Okay. This is some miracle gene on platinum tech
Yep.
where your gauge becomes your discard and that becomes your boosts. So
Yep.
okay. So you have kind of a recursion engine going on in your gauge with this card.
Not just gauge. Yeah, in your gauge you can use it as a recursion engine, but if you've got cards that are no longer useful because of whatever resources are available to you and your opponent, that's free force to go. Okay, let me return 2 specials from my discard pile to get, whatever's
Yeah,
viable in the matchup.
whatever you need at that moment, right?
Yeah. Uh I have a couple that I take as a rule of thumb and then alter for there, but you could return a card because you had the other copy in hand, so now you have the EX. But one
Right.
thing to note, because it is returned from the discard, that is a public zone. The opponent will know what you return
Right.
because, they could check before you take it out of the discard and then check after.
Sure,
So you
sure.
might as well
Yeah,
just show
you
them.
might as well just show them to speed up the game a little bit. That makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
so for Still in the Dark, I see the value of you may push one. And looking at the rest of his kit, I'm not seeing anything that +1 power. Any incredibly important breakpoints we might go from 4 to 5
Mm.
on leap, for example.
Yeah.
But is the +1 power really for things like when I have a specific EX that I'm trying to hit and I can cancel into it with a little bit of extra power? Like it's not the power is like
Yeah.
a bonus, but the push is really where it's at.
Yeah, so really with Zato, you're not winning by stunning things out. A lot of the time it's positioning control that is winning. So the plus
Okay.
1 power is nice, but positional control is where it's at.
Okay.
Um, you will, and a lot of his stuff doesn't hit super hard, so adding that plus 1 power is just nice to hit a bit harder.
Okay.
So it can turn Leap, our next card, from hitting from 4 to 5, damn it without trading.
Right.
Which is always nice. That's an extra 25% damage on that card.
And there's a lot of like 4 speed, 4 guard specials in Exceed. So like that actually could be relevant for stunning
Yeah,
as well. But even if it's not, I would rather hit for 5 than 4.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Cool.
Uh, so let's go on to our next special. The one I consider this one as an attack and boost to be one of the most powerful things in his kit. So it's a 1 to 3, 4, 5. Hit, push 1 from the source of this attack, draw 1.
Okay.
So at range 3, so we're not even counting Eddie. Eddie's just from Zato as normal. This is on curve at range 3. It pushes 1, so it beats spike and sweep.
Right.
It beats dive, it beats assault. It beats every corner of the normals mix up if you strike with it at range 3. and it draws you a card.
Right. Yeah, that's like even before you get to the value of the card draw, that's very rare that you can just say no to a mix up at range 3 without crossing out or something.
Yeah, like obviously it loses to like EX Assault. Okay, you lost to an EX
Yeah.
at its preferred range.
Right. Yeah, that happens to you sometimes.
Yeah, that's just the reality.
Right.
Uh now you consider Eddie's in play. The opponent's at range 4, and Eddie's at range 2 from you, like in the middle of you two evenly.
Right.
Ah, push. And now they're at 5. You've made more distance, and you've gained advantage, and you've drawn a card. Oh, you have advantage. You can make use of that card straight away.
Right.
Uh, it's just a very good attack. Like, there's nothing about it that you look at it and you go, that's absurd. It's all very reasonable things that just add up into a way that can be quite frustrating.
Yeah. I'm trying really hard not to refer to the things on this card as a lot because that's this card
That's a,
over here.
yeah, that's a lot is a different card.
Yeah,
But
it's a
yeah,
different card.
it ha-
But there's a lot of things on this card.
yeah, there's it's just little incremental things like this. If this was a 1 to 2 card, even on curve, it wouldn't be that good. You
Right.
know, like you still
Wouldn't
lose to sweep and
both
spike.
sweep and spike, right.
But because it hits at 3, that push one matters.
Right.
Uh, and 4 power is nothing to sneeze at. It's probably the most common power in Exceed. It's
Right.
probably like the average power. It's a good. It's yeah, and if you add a damage to it, which you have a couple sources of plus power in the kit, you know, can hit 5 or 7 power.
Right, right.
That's spoilers, but yeah. Uh, and
So
then so the attack is insane.
yeah,
The attack is very good. This is one of my default returns when I'm using Let Me Carve Your Way.
right.
Just because there are very few scenarios where this attack is not good.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff that's happening at range 3 in general and Exceed, right? Like this is a pretty common range to find yourself. Uh
Yeah,
you're frequently going to really want, and also you want to make range on your opponent. This is a great way to do it.
yeah. 3 and 1, I would say, are probably the most common exchange ranges.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have Vanish into Dark. This boost is also quite good. So it is +1 speed, always good. Plus speed. Some people will say speed is the best stat in Exceed. I'm not going to debate that, but it's certainly a very important one.
Right.
And now place Eddie in your space. That's 2 good effects.
Yep.
And also advance or retreat 2, which is force efficient movement. So you go for in one boost, you go from range 1 with no speed and no Eddie to range 3 with +1 speed and Eddie.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, you've just spent a leap to put Eddie on the board and move to range 3. I don't know, the range you would prefer to play leap at.
Right.
Small sacrifice because, you are at range 3 with +1 speed and Eddie at range 1 of the opponent.
Yeah. That's a pretty great setup for most of the other cards in your kit.
Yeah, like it's also just, force efficient movement, which is always you're always happy about. Like even if you use it to you're cornered and the opponent okay, advance
Yeah.
2,
Yeah.
you end up at range 2,
Now you're out of the
but it
corner.
didn't cost you 3 force to
Right.
do it.
Right.
And that's +1 speed. Zato loves cross, uh, because it gives him so many different ways to place Eddie, puts him at range to make it harder for the opponent to deal with. Uh, so now you're at cross
So
range with
a
a bonus speed,
with bonus speed so that they can't stun you out with
like
so like
DPs.
initiating with an EX or initiating with a cross of their own or something like that.
Yeah, like it's just nice.
Cool. Okay.
Uh, yeah, I do prefer the attack. I think leap is better than Vanish into Dark, but Vanish into Dark is far from bad. Like, obviously, it'd have to be a pretty good boost to compete with the attack it's on,
Yeah,
and I
because
do find it does compete.
which is that saying something on its own. And so leap is something that you mentioned if you're not at range 3 specifically, if you're not at range 3
Yeah,
when Eddie's not on the board, this loses a lot of
yeah,
value. So your
yeah,
opponent could conceivably, like, they know that leap is really good, so they're actively denying you that value. You can't actually get to the point where leap would really be awesome. Okay, well, now I play Vanish into Dark and I have set up a threatening board state. Um, and I've done that because they've been consistently playing around where leap would be good. Is that the kind of thing that
yeah,
I should be thinking about?
yeah. If the opponent's constantly not standing at 3, or they threaten a tool that consistently beats Leap, there are a few stuff that is Guardy and closes in a
Right.
lot, or
Or a title
fast.
whirl or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. If they have stuff like that, you know, that's a situation when you can look at Leap and go, okay, I can boost this, and you don't have to boost it at 1. If you're at range 2, you can boost Leap and
Yeah.
retreat to 4
Get away, and
or
now
whatever.
suddenly you're threatening Pierce and a whole lot of other stuff.
Like, you don't have to always use it at 1. I find it comes up at range 1 quite a lot, but it doesn't have to be there. And again, it's a 5-speed card. If fast things are down,
Right.
you know, looking to end the game, 5-speed, 4 power, have at you.
Yeah, I've ended plenty of games with assault. In
Yeah,
undercurve assault because there's nothing faster than it left.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Um, Leap is pretty much just an upgrade to assault, especially if Eddie's on the board. If
You
Eddie's on
still
the
get
board,
advantage, yeah.
yeah, it's fantastic. Love this card. Yeah, great
Cool.
card.
Okay.
Next special is Invite Hell. It's 2 to 5, 3, 4, which your specials calculate from Eddie, so that sounds like it might be really awkward.
Right.
Don't worry, they thought of this. Before, if Eddie is in play, +2 power and place Eddie in your space before calculating range.
Okay.
That's just reminder text, because
Right.
obviously before's always occur.
Is always
And then
before range calc, yeah. Okay.
as hit, draw 1. So this is sort of the opponent has a range dodge, attacks at range 1 don't hit.
Right.
This would not be at range 1. It's also, just another option, The opponent's at, say, your leaps down, uh, your leaps down and Eddie's at range 2 from the opponent, something like that.
Right.
You can play this and it'll come to you. Now, this one's a bit awkward because you don't gain the range benefit from Eddie, right? Because it will always calculate range from you. You don't
Yeah,
get your
because Eddie comes to you,
range
right.
modification.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But on the other hand, it's tied for his highest power special
Right. With Eddie
if
in
you have
play,
Eddie in play.
this is 5, right. And so
Yeah,
is striking with this with Eddie in play is basically just like a strict upgrade over striking without him in play,
without
because
correct.
all it actually does is give you the bonus power. And it puts Eddie where you are, which, you know,
Doesn't
could be a
matter.
good thing, could be a bad thing. Oh, no, it goes
Well,
to
Eddie
cleanup.
will
That's
go
right.
away.
He goes away. That's right. Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And you're also getting, the advantage off Eddie.
Right.
So it's just strictly a benefit.
Right. Is it so much of a benefit that you wouldn't bother playing this card when you don't have Eddie in play? Or
Um,
I feel like with
free free damage is free damage. Like, if
true.
it's just gonna win and you don't think you can convert it to power, you can convert it to value another way. I'm gonna tell you that you probably can convert it to power value another way in a second. But if you're in a situation where you think it's what you can convert it. It has hit draw 1 on it. Okay, you can just play it, especially if you don't want to waste a turn putting Eddie in.
Okay.
There's only one way in the kit that you can put Eddie on the board and strike in the same turn.
Do I sense a segue?
You absolutely do. The
Excellent work.
boost,
Yeah. Okay. Negative
yeah,
edge.
negative edge. This is how you can get value from this card always. Uh, I use this boost a lot more than I use this attack. Um, it's simply place Eddie in any space, and it's cancelable. So, two things about this. You don't have to cancel it. Sometimes you can just use it to put Eddie on the board without interacting with the opponent. You don't
Right.
have to engage in a strike to make that happen,
Right.
which is nice. You're a zoner. The less, you know, I mentioned grappler movement earlier. It means you don't have to give your opponent the chance to engage in grappler movement. They just play their assault or whatever to try and get in a bit. But also, it means, you say we're in this position. I play leap, pushes the opponent out. I get advantage, and Eddie goes away.
All
And
in one.
then
All
I
in one
boost.
turn. And oh, I'm sorry.
Yep,
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Doing it in the other order. Then you negative edge. Put it back down.
put it back down, cancel because I just
Right.
got a gauge because
Just
I
got
hit with
gauge.
leap,
Yep.
and then I can strike.
Right.
So this is how you maintain pressure and snowball with Zato. Like it's a very strong tool to just consistently maintain pressure.
Right. Because Eddie's cleanup rider on his card means that you can't advantage chain like natively because you can't unless you have like an assault in your hand or something. You can't gain advantage uh, from Eddie more than once in a row without putting him back down, and that's what this does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And it's the only tool in his kit that does that, and you can strike.
Right.
Like the other tool in his kit that allows you to place Eddie is the one we spoke about earlier, Vanish into Dark.
Right.
That's not
It's not
cancelable.
cancelable,
So you
right?
so you're gonna if you do that, you're gonna give your opponent a turn to respond.
Right.
Negative edge, you can just put Eddie down and strike.
Right.
Uh, Invite Hell is not a bad fireball. It's a mid-speed fireball, and it draws you a card. And if Eddie's in play, it gains you advantage and hits decently hard. That's not bad, but I think Negative Edge is just an absurdly useful setup tool. It's just so core to his flow.
So we would rather
Oh,
be boosting this to maintain pressure from other specials, or I guess from normals too, because now they have to think about uh, everything, not just like mix-ups
yeah,
exist. But this turns on the rest of my kit enough that Invite Hell might be the second thing I play it for instead of or after Negative Edge.
yeah.
Okay.
Negative Edge is absolutely the priority there.
Okay.
You know, if I use Negative Edge to put Eddie at range 2 here, well, now the opponent has to consider the normal range 3 mix-up and also Pierce,
Right.
which means they can't just freely cross out of the range 3 mix-up.
Right. They have to participate now.
Because if I hit them with Pierce there, I've hit them for 3, and I've gained advantage, and I've drawn 2, because I've stunned them.
Right. So you've actually got
It,
and now a cross is down. So like you're now they have to participate in your later mix-ups too.
yep.
Okay.
So that's why I think 3 to 4 is a really good range. 4, if you're not just outright zoning, 4 is good because your tools are just most people don't have good tools at 4,
Right.
and you do. You have decent tools. Like even without Eddie, you have 2 specials that hit at range 4.
Right. Yeah. You
So
actually have a couple parts of the move don't move mix up. You still can dive in all that stuff. So is negative edge like like this is also just the text on negative edge kind of has some commonality with Zato's Exceed side where you can put Eddie in any space. Is
yep,
part of why you don't need to exceed in like every game as Zato because you can negative edge twice and
nope.
you don't need to worry about
You
it. Okay.
can you can
Oh,
negative edge 4 times
that's
per
right.
shuffle.
Yeah, you could because you
Nope,
could
sorry, 6.
you can get let me carve your way back over and or get it back over and over again. So you don't really need to exceed as Zato to have really, really good positioning of Eddie because you have a lot of copies of Negative Edge.
Yeah, you have two, and then you return it 4 times with, twice with each copy of
Sun
Let Me
Void.
Carve Your Way.
Right.
Yep. So if there's a tool in a matchup that the opponent cannot deal with for Zato, he has 6 copies of it at a shuffle.
Right.
Uh, Rip the opponent.
Right. And
Now,
which tool that is going to depend on the matchup, obviously. But a lot of times it would be enabled by being able to put Eddie down and then striking immediately with Negative Edge.
yeah.
Right.
Though notably, Let Me Carve Your Way is not cancelable,
Right.
so you can't return something then use it immediately,
Right.
unfortunately.
Right. That makes
And if
sense.
you return, the good news is it's only specials, so you can't return a normal and then get red.
Oh, true.
That's a thing that could happen to you, which would suck.
Right. You also can't return the other copy of Sun Void then.
Yes,
Right.
you cannot infinitely loop Sun Void, uh, which also thank God.
Right.
I like people not hating me.
Yeah. No, that seems
Um,
like something that they I think they probably learned their lesson on that sometime in season 1.
yeah, no, let's not think about that.
Right.
That's sad thinking.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's Invite Hell. It's
Okay.
a mostly a boost with a competent, if not outstanding, attack on it. Um, the boost on it though is outstanding.
Okay. Sounds
Um,
good.
then then we have the other part of the range. Eddie's not at range 1 mix up.
Right.
So basically, if Eddie's not at range 1, most of the time you are threatening. That's a lot bleep. Um, you know, if we're in board positioning where the opponent actually can cross out, this sort of board positioning, if the opponent crosses out, they can dodge leap,
Right.
and then they get hit for 5 by that's a lot,
Right.
and you advance up to 2.
So this is like it's a cross catcher when Eddie's not on the board if you're at range 1, but it's still a cross catcher because they're sometimes trying to cross out from Eddie instead of you.
Yep,
Okay, because Eddie's playing mix ups too.
yep. You, Eddie is you, but you can't get hurt, so he's just you but better.
Right.
Uh, yeah, he doesn't threaten the normals, but he can't get hurt, so he's
Yeah.
perfect. It's also three.
Decent trade off there.
It's also 3 speed, which means if you initiate with it at range 3, this beats Spike.
Yes.
Well, also it's 5 power, so it's stun Spike,
Stun spike. Right.
but also things with very fixed ranges. They your 2 to 4s or whatever, or stuff that advances. Guardy advancing things as opposed to Guardy closing things. You have positional control on that's a lot.
Because it's
And it,
advanced up to 2.
yep, so you could advance 0, 1, or 2.
So
So,
you wouldn't have to run into your opponent's sweep if you played this at 4. Um,
yep.
so it's a it would also be part of your your opening mix up, or are you generally doing something different at the beginning of the game?
So my opening mix up is one that's not very threatening. I like to play cross.
Okay.
Cross or sweep is really my opening mix up. The reasoning there is if the opponent thinks I'm playing cross, dive is a really good option because
Right.
they at least come in when I move out.
Right.
But, if they come in and I've played sweep, I've hit them with sweep.
Right.
Um, or they play block or whatever, and
Now
I've played sweep.
you've put Eddie down, right?
Yeah. So it's a I like to do the opening mix up with the normals to get Eddie in play, but
Okay.
also just boosting negative edge can be a strong early turn tool.
Right. This is
Just
maybe one of the first times that I've heard somebody advocate for uh playing sweep where it might not hit. And so Eddie
yeah,
getting Eddie on the board in a threatening position is that important to Zato's game plan that you would be willing to drop a sweep to do it?
Yes, but also it can hit
Right,
because
because
it
they could
covers.
dive in. Right,
Yeah, it covers the other one of the other possible options. Same purpose. I use spike.
okay,
Spike in that same mix up. It doesn't beat the dive, but it does still set Eddie at range 2 or 3,
right,
like sweep does.
right,
So it can serve that purpose, same as sweep. It just loses to dive, whereas sweep beats dive.
right. Okay.
But yeah, no, that one's a bit of a brave call.
Right.
But I most of the time it works because the opponent will expect the cross because you know it's free value.
Right.
Um, then on so that's a lot is like a positioning based mid speed. It hits. It's his hardest hitting special, just always. Like it matches the power of Invite Hell, but Invite Hell's power is conditional.
Right. On Eddie, this always hits for 5.
Yep. And it always gives you your after move after advance up to 2, which is
Right.
important because it has full guard. So even if the opponent, range 3 assaults into you, you still have positional control. You can still
You can still, yeah,
move.
your loss case in that situation isn't so bad. Um,
Yep.
okay. So again, really, really strong range 3 play, range 4 play, that sort of area. Um, and
Yep.
so like this speaks to what you were saying earlier about that being one of his stronger ranges. Um, and should I just, when Eddie's in play, should I just consider like everything, literally everything you just said, but from Eddie instead of from Zato?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Um, the advance, uh, if Eddie's in play, is a lot less likely to occur. So say we're in this sort of board state.
You're not going to
Um,
give up this range by
yeah,
advancing in. You're just going to keep the positioning.
yeah. But I also had the option to. So
Right.
don't bank on them not moving,
Right.
which is the complicated part. They're not beholden to anything. But I find that's a lot is a bit awkward. 2 to 4 is an awkward range band, especially at speed 3. Um, yeah. Think of about how awkward Spike is. Especially when one of the place it can occur from, the opponent can stand on it.
Right. And this it'll never hit here. Or here. Like you actually have a
Yeah,
pretty serious range shadow. Um
yeah,
they
yeah,
could assault from here and get in and be safe from pretty much everything.
yeah. If they
What
predict that's a lot, they can absolutely move in and
right.
stand on it. Uh, they'd get owned pretty hard by leap,
I
but
leap,
if both
exactly.
leaps are down,
Right.
but yeah. So it is somewhat of an awkward card. Um, Now the boost on it is breaking the law. It is illegal.
You can't
Nay,
do it.
now you may spend 1 force if you do strike, and it has an after, so the after will always occur. You you'll always have the after. It's just
Even if you
giving you the option to spend a force to strike.
even if you don't choose to strike. Okay.
Yep. After you may after sorry, it's not you may. It's advance or retreat 1 or 2. So you're
Right.
always going to have to advance or retreat with this.
Right.
Um, and it's always 1 or 2. So that's like a decent amount. Um, this is a card. I mentioned I foreshadowed this. This is the other after movement in the kit.
Right.
Um, so same rules apply as apply to cross. Gives you so many more places where you can place Eddie. It also means your grasp at range 1, positioning allowed, just typically wins.
Right. Yeah, that beats every normal. Yeah.
Yep, positioning allowing,
Right.
you can just make this work. Um, Obviously, you'd rather use the position. You'd rather stun them outright with grasp and then just use the positioning to do what you want.
And
But
make as much space as possible, but really it's
you
you
work
know,
with what you can do.
if they wild swing a spike at range 1 and you're like, all right, this is going to be sort of awkward, maybe, I'm in the corner here, I can't back up far enough, I'll I'll move, I'll
Yeah,
push and then I'll advance 1 or something,
yeah,
you'll take it to dodge the spike.
yeah.
Okay.
The other thing this can be quite good for is you just put it in play, and then suddenly your grasp is just a movement based dodge. If they don't have a pretty forgiving range on their attack, you don't even have to hit.
Right. You like to
It's a
it's like an empty cross. You're happy with just backing up anyway.
yep, or advancing or whatever. Yeah, it's just a
Right.
7 speed. It doesn't back up as far as cross, but most of the time that doesn't matter if you're using it as like an empty cross. But more often, I am using this as a um, break the law, spend force to strike. I particularly like it at range 3. So assault, and then retreat 1 or 2, and then place Eddie at range 1
Right.
of you. So then you've hit the opponent, you've gained advantage, you've set up Eddie. So,
Right.
so Eddie's there now. Uh, cool. Or I've, retreated, and now Eddie's at range 1.
Right.
Cool.
And because you can stack those triggers, you could even conceivably do it before you retreated at all and
Yeah,
put them on top of here
yeah.
for whatever reason,
Or if you're
and then back up
exceeded,
anywhere.
yeah, you can put him anywhere. In
Right.
which case, ordering the triggers doesn't matter because you can place him anywhere at any point.
Right. Okay.
But but yeah, I like it with assault. I like it with grasp. Uh, it can be useful with other things, obviously. Uh, if you have this in play, the opponent's probably not going to play focus, uh, because if you have advance or retreat 1 or 2, you can, in almost every board state, make focus miss.
Right.
But it's not bad. It is quite a good boost, just for a lot of, particularly in close range situations. The other one I should mention is, say we're in this position, I initiate cross. Sorry, I break the law and initiate cross. Then I
I
advance
advance
2.
and then retreat. Okay.
Yeah. So, or, even range 1, I advance 2 and then I retreat.
In that case, then also if we do that
Yeah.
and I uh I strike with cross, and now I have a ridiculous amount of eddy control. I could do it here. I could put
Every
him.
space on the board.
Yeah, I could put him here, or I could do it here after my advance from break the law. Put him here, or I could then retreat 3 and put him here. Yeah, so
Yeah, you can.
that's literally every spot.
Yes, literally
Okay,
every space on the board.
okay,
Uh, yep.
and
Your opponent probably isn't going to think you're playing cross because you're cornered. So it's
uh,
just fantastic.
okay, um, and it sounds like there's a lot of use cases for break the law, but I'm also looking at the rest of the damage in his kit, and I'm seeing a lot of lower numbers. Do I need to worry about spending that's a lot just because I might need the damage, or can I pretty freely play break the law?
I think you can pretty freely play it. I hinted at it earlier, but there is a way to get +3 power on attacks in his
Right,
kit.
right,
Um, so you land 1 or 2 strikes with +3 power, and then win other strikes clean, which break the law helps you do. Um, you're winning the game.
right. You don't
+3
need
powers.
you don't need this
Yeah,
5 damage necessarily.
yeah, it's not the worst, and it is a good mix up to threaten. The 2 cards I often return with "Let Me Carve Your Way" is a leap and a "That's a Lot," because
Okay,
they're both useful boosts in a couple of situations, and they provide a mix up as attacks.
right,
Now, in saying that, leap doesn't lose to a whole lot of things, but it's just nice to have.
makes sense. Okay, and also leap, as you said, is pretty conditional on being a range 3 option for most of the game. So
Yeah,
you might need to, if your opponent's not being cooperative with you, you might need to recur something else.
yeah. Or actually, that's another thing I can point out. Leap is a good option for this. They're out of speed 6 options. Break the law, leap.
Oh, you push and then you back up. Sure, now you've made a ton of space.
Yep. You you know the the same thing Leap normally does. You give it a bit of a hand to do. I mean, that's
Right.
3 force to do it
Right.
because yeah, that's a lot, and then you spend a force to strike with it, and you struck with Leap.
Right.
But yeah, that's 4 damage that hasn't been a trade.
And now both of these are in your gauge or your discard pile. It's time to let me carve your way to get them right back
Yep,
again.
yep.
Yep, makes sense.
Resources are silly.
Yep,
Um, and because he has 32 cards, he technically has an extra 2 force in his kit,
true.
which never hurts. Extra resources are never bad.
Right. Excuse me.
Um, no, all good. So then we're on to it, the option that most often is what is uh, you are getting to hit people with Pierce with because they are
This
worried
is the
about
thing that
Damned Fang.
they're scared of. Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's a 1/4/3, ignore guard, hit pull 2, clarifying it's towards Zato, draw 2. So it's a range 1 spike, which even without Eddie, it's never bad to have a range 1 spike. A
Right.
tool that beats sweep and focus, you should never be worried about having. Uh, and then at longer ranges, say I have EX in my hand, uh, on curve, and
Oh
then
yeah,
it gains advantage, and it sets up range 2 for me to cross out, and it also draws me 2.
and it draws you 2 cards. Yeah. So this is not just a mix-up option that scares them into playing other things. Sometimes this just basically wins for free.
Yep. You got to have the right positioning, but like
But you also have a
that's
lot of positioning
Zato's thing.
control. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
set up these positionings if you want to go for it.
yeah. Um, on the other hand, say we're in this sort of position, the threat of Damned Fang makes the opponent less likely to respond with focus or sweep,
Right.
so you can hit them with Pierce, or you can hit with, we're more in this sort of position, or something like this. So you can hit them with Cross and not get swept.
Right.
Like it's just a range 1 spike is always a lovely tool to have. And again, it's another instance of doing damage without taking damage.
Right. Right. And that's kind of the plan here for him.
Yeah, you don't have to hit hard because you're dealing damage and not taking damage.
Right.
Which hmm?
Oh, I was gonna say, so then your delta, you don't have to have really impressive damage numbers if to have a high delta if your opponent's not hitting you.
Yeah, your deltas are infinite.
Right. So in the situation that you were advocating here, where you were saying, EX Damned Fang is even on curve and just probably wins, and now you get advantage. You can cross out all that stuff. I know from talking to you in previous lessons that you really value the threat of having one of these live from talking about platinum
Dramatic.
and talking about diving dig on Mole Knight and things like that. Um,
Yep.
is this a situation where kind of the same things apply, where you would be have difficulty giving up both of these because of the threats that the threat of this makes other things more
More
usable in
per
his kit? Or
Yeah, so
go ahead.
the the thing is, uh there's a couple reasons I don't consider that as important for Zato. For one, he doesn't have to be at close to do a lot of his game plan,
Right,
which Platinum ends up getting close. Mole Knight literally comes in to get hit. So having those as a threat remains useful. If you're able to keep the opponent out, it doesn't really matter because most cards aren't slows. Long range cards aren't slows.
right,
The other reason I'm not as concerned with, playing them as an EX is, let me carve your way. The moment you have recursion in your kit, the idea of something going down doesn't have to matter as much.
right, right. Okay,
Because, like, it goes down and then I gain advantage, and my next turn could be let me carve your way to return both copies of that.
Right. And now suddenly you're threatening it again, and not just threatening like, oh, maybe it's somewhere in my deck. He probably doesn't have it. No, it's in your hand. You have it right now. You have to deal with it.
Or even better is so say I do that, I pull, I gain my advantage, I draw my cards, then I do negative edge cancel to place Eddie on the board,
Right.
and then I let me carve my way. So not only am I theoretically threatening it, I'm literally threatening an EX.
Right.
Yeah. So it can be quite brutal. The only thing, and I think this matters, if you're super zoning the opponent, you're at range 6 or whatever, this pulls 2.
Right.
You're giving up some of that range. So it's less useful at that.
That makes sense. And most of the time, it seems like there things are going to be occurring a little bit more in the mid range because your opponent isn't going to just let you zone them for free. So you might not always have to worry about that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
it is a
like
thing to consider.
yeah, this is like a win condition for Zato. So he would probably rather not uh, give it up if he didn't have to. But so it's something to consider. Okay.
Yeah. And then the boost on it is a cancelable cancelable boost. So it's the third one in his kit. It is Drunkard Shade. Attacks at range 4 plus do not hit you. At the start of your turn, add this to your gauge. So, Eddie's off the board and I'm at range 6 from Ryu. Um, Terrifying. Just awful.
Right.
Um, I can play this and give myself a safe turn. I can also play this and cancel it if I have some way to make grappler movement. I use dive to move in. Or I can play this and then or essentially use it as a key charge.
Right.
Uh,
Because they
because
can't hit me. They can't hit me anyway. I'm passing the turn to them, but at least I'll just get gauge at the beginning of the turn.
yeah, and then do what you will with that. If
Right.
it's and getting that your first gauge is useful because negative edge, you get that
Right.
gauge, you can put negative edge, you can cancel it. Yeah, so I think it's a boost that I don't play very often. I find it doesn't come up super a lot because it does require you being in a matchup with an opponent who can zone you, and you have a turn that you can do this, and you don't have a better option.
Right. Right. Right.
You know, like you moving isn't an option or whatever. But a range dodge is a nice thing to have. Like both sides of this card are pretty situational tools, but having them is very useful. Or you're at range and you're going to hit them with Eddie, but they have a ranged fireball and you don't have a way to stun it at the moment. For some reason, it's stun immune, so Damned Fang won't work.
Right.
Uh, you drunkard shade, cancel that and strike. Now their stun immune fireball can't hit you anyway.
Right. And so now
So
you've won combat, maybe not free resource wise, but free reprisal wise. They can't hit you back at least.
yeah, free threat wise, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, it's they're both nice tools on this card with a couple of uses. Um, Not the highest priority, but uh, threatening them and punishing the opponent with them works quite well.
Gotcha. Okay.
So these first 5 specials all have one important thing in common. When you play them, Eddie will go away
Right.
as part of his ability. The 6th special, Oppose, does not do that. So it's a 0 to 1, 0, 2 speed, 2 armor, 5 guard. So 7 defenses is already nice. 2
Right.
armor, always happy. So it's a 0 to 1, which means that situations where the opponent, it can functionally be, it covers 3 range because it one to the other side of it, like
And
sweep has the
and pretty much all of these lose if the opponent is just standing on top of Eddie.
yeah. And then it has do not remove Eddie from play during cleanup. So immediately playing this preserves Eddie.
Right.
So even if you don't hit the opponent, you fake them out into playing something else. You, and it's got 2 armor on it, which 2 armor is 2 armor.
Yep.
You've kept Eddie in play. And then it has before if you were hit +3 power. So not it can hit for nothing. So we're at this positioning. The opponent goes, okay, Leap is down. I'm gonna advance onto Eddie. It I don't do any damage, but at least I hit for gauge. Opposed goes to gauge. So that can be like a useful tool to bait out options and also just to have 2 armor. Like
Right.
come at the end of the game, 2 armor can be the difference between winning and dying.
Sure. Sure.
Even without Eddie, the opponent range 3 assaults you. You take 2, they take 3.
Right.
Um,
The before if you were hit isn't contingent on Eddie being there at all. It's just that you wouldn't get the opportunity to maintain him in play from opposed.
yeah, yeah. And then it's got a cancelable boost, fly by night, advance or retreat 1, so force efficient movement, and then you may add a card from your hand to your gauge.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's fine. Uh, I'm not the biggest fan of this boost personally, but sometimes you do need, micro position and then cancel and then do something with it.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Not.
we're at
Yeah.
we're,
You.
we're
It
at
seems like
2.
you would prefer to do the same thing with Eddie, which doesn't require you to really move very much at all. But sometimes if your setup
Yes,
is like, all right, well, I'm at something that would really, really prefer, like Eddie's in play, I'd really prefer to be
yeah.
at range 3, but I'm not. Okay, I'll back up and now I'm at range 3 and I can do my stuff.
Or even I'm at range. Oh, that was weird. I'm at range 2. Okay, I'll fly by night and cancel. Okay, now my leap is leap.
Right. Yeah, now my
It's
leap
full
is
powered.
online. I can be scary with that. Um yeah, okay. So if you're using this, it's like this is what you use to set up your game plan. This is what you use to like get out of a situation where your opponent is like trying to trap you, it seems like.
Yeah,
Or you're
yeah,
like making a little nudge to your game plan rather than setting it up.
yeah. It also, has a key charge on it. So even if you just want fly by night, move 1, and then add a card from your hand to your gauge if you need to hit a cutoff point or something.
Right.
You need, or you just need that first gauge. Turn 1, fly by night out to range 5, add a card from your hand to your gauge.
Makes sense.
Technically, is you've force efficient movement and you've added a resource to your gauge, and then you could cancel if you want. You add a card from your hand to your gauge, and then you can cancel. It's
Right.
like
And
the one
you're
on
not
Happy Chaos.
and you're not on this turn 1 play, you're not striking, you're not doing any damage, but you could conceivably, I mean, you could use that gauge to then play negative edge and set Eddie in play or something. Like
Yeah,
this
th-
is this
it's
is this is flexible, but maybe not like overwhelmingly powerful.
yeah, it's flexible. Maybe not super impactful, but when there are times you'll look at it in your hand and go, "Aha!" You know, you've got speed in play, and you want to threaten a specific option.
Right.
You know, yeah.
Uh,
It's nothing overwhelming, but neither is the attack. So both halves are just sort of okay. I can get value out of that.
Sure.
Yeah. Uh, then onto the ultras. His very important tools. So Sun Void is a 2 gauge ultra, 0 to 1, 3/7, and do not remove Eddie from play during cleanup. So the part that is hidden on this is really 0 to 1, 3/7.
Gain
Do not remove
advantage.
Eddie. Yeah, do not remove Eddie from play during cleanup. Gain advantage. So it
Right.
maintains your setup. It does 3 damage. It's at speed 7, which you don't hit in, like none of your specials hit. You're gaining advantage. So, you pop the opponent, the setup remains, so then you can follow up. Just nice. It's just a nice little DP ranged threat, or even range one. It's still a speed 7.
Sure. Again, end of game situation. They got 3 life. They got no armor left. It's almost a checkmate.
Yeah, like it.
And at the beginning of the lesson, I think you described this as being like very playable. So it's 2 gauge. It's not
Yep,
going to break the bank, but and sometimes when you're at range, it's almost like a maybe like I might as well, or sort of like a why not situation. Like I'll take 3 damage and
yeah,
maintain my setup for later. Like that all sounds cool.
yep. The only problem with Sun Void is the boost it has on it that I keep referring to.
Yeah, this has already come up many times as being like the primary consideration here.
Yeah, even with just the now effect on it, Let Me Carve Your Way is very useful.
Right,
Adding +1 power is a nice bonus. You know, you have two sources of +1 power, um, and one of which is cancelable. So you can still in the dark, push one, cancel, Let Me Carve Your Way, and Let Me Carve Your Way cost force, not gauge. So,
right,
and you will return the same amount of force to your hand.
right. So it's just a recycle. It's not you're not spending more than you're getting most of the time.
Yep. Yeah. If you spend from gauge, you just get value. Like
Right.
you just get value in hand. Uh, so Sun Void has a bit of rough competition there.
Sure.
Like I could play Sun Void or I could play EX Pierce that I've returned with Let Me Carve Your Way.
Right. That
EX
that
Pierce is just better.
yeah, it deals more damage because of the +1 power and because of the EX. It gains
It
advantage
has
anyway. All you're losing is your Eddie setup for
yeah,
a turn.
but I have positional control off it.
Right.
Like
You
that
might you might get more resources from it. Yeah, no, it's just better.
yeah. But on the other hand, sometimes you just need a or the other thing about it is it hits at 0.
Right. Okay. Both of
The
these two
opponent's
do.
on the opponent's on 0 on Eddie. They think, okay, I can assault and I will avoid the oppose. But this is not the case for Sun Void.
Right.
That they've managed. I've crossed out, and then they're Ryu, so they stop on, and they're like, all right. So if I play, well, not in this position because that would be bad. Because that spike would just win there. But like
Right.
this positioning, they go, okay, if I play assault or I play dive, I'm gonna escape. I'll be okay. Post doesn't do anything,
Sun
and then they
Void
get hit.
just stuffs them.
Yeah,
Right. Okay.
yeah. So that is a useful consideration, especially given that some of the counterplay, a lot of the counterplay to Zato is making any positionings awkward,
Right.
standing in blind spots, that sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
So having a tool that can work around that, but in saying that, Let Me Carve Your Way lets you work around that by
Right. Yeah.
returning things that cover
With
blind spots.
with almost everything else in your kit. So unless they're in literally the specific blind spot that only Sun Void can cover, in
Yep.
the deck composition state that allows Sun Void to only cover it, just just get your stuff back and get some power.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or you really don't want to give them a turn. They're a character that can turn a turn into a nightmare.
Okay. Like a lot of season 7 characters can. So you might prefer to maintain advantage over a couple turns and
Yeah.
run your offense for a while.
Yeah, the opponent is happy chaos and you're like, nah, fuck that.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to deal with 5 happy chaos turns in a row.
Yeah. Something like that. Perfectly reasonable to just play Sunvoid. Like
Okay.
I get that. That's as much as I think Let Me Carve Your Way is amazing, sometimes you can't let the opponent take a turn.
Right. Makes sense.
Uh Now here's Amorphous. This is a very strange attack. It's a 4 gauge ultra, so immediately
Yeah.
you look at it and you think, okay, so it must be cracked.
Right. Yeah. This is a Metsushoryuken tier ultra.
Unfortunately,
Right.
not really. So it's a range 3, just only range 3. It's 6 power, it's 1 speed, it's 2 armor. It
Right.
is stun immune, and it has after draw 3. It's a very strange attack because it's specifically range 3. So
Right.
sometimes the opponent at range 3 will play focus because focus is a good card to play. It at least doesn't lose positioning to leap. It beats assault.
Right.
Okay. So maybe you can get Amorphous off here. Full gauge, you generate gauge because you hit with Zato. Your tools are pretty decent at hitting the opponent. 4 is a bit hard to build up to because you have a lot of things you can spend it on in the kit.
You're
Couple of
canceling.
cancels.
You're
You got
spending force to
break
get stuff back.
you break the law to spend a strike. Hell, you might even be exceeding.
Right.
So four is quite expensive.
Right.
And the draw is not force efficient. It's draw 3 on a strike that costs you a minimum of 6 force.
Right.
Ultra is 2 and then 4 from gauge.
4 from the gauge. You could have had an ultra engage, and that's upping
Yeah,
your force
even
cost.
worse.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, it is the highest printed power he has available to him. It is 6 power. If you hit 6, it's an 8 delta attack.
Right.
That's a lot of numbers.
Right. And with draw 3 on top of it, you get a whole lot of value out of it. But there are so many, like, even, I mean,
And you
even if they spike you, yeah, you're still doing the damage, but now they're ignoring the armor. Like, it's tough to get everything out of this card.
yeah, and you're always guaranteed the draw
Right.
because it's stun immune, but
Right.
it is an awkward attack. And if you get it off Eddie, which requires, even more strange positioning
Yeah.
stuff.
Now you're like specifically here or something, and we'll get to why you should probably just use the. I'm sure the boost is probably more relevant there.
Yep.
Um,
Um yeah. So if that's the case, yeah, you get advantage, which means you can turn those 3 you've drawn into something.
right,
Or you could have just changed cards.
right.
But it's okay because this attack has Feel of Fear on it, which is
So
strike.
we don't have to worry about Amorphous anyway.
You don't have to worry about Amorphous. This is where the +3 power in the kit is. Now
Yes,
strike. Hit if the opponent is between you and Eddie, not in Eddie's space, +3 power.
right,
So this positioning, this positioning, this positioning, any positioning where Eddie is between you, the opponent is between you and Eddie, +3 power.
right,
The exceed is quite good for setting this up because you can place Eddie anywhere. Obviously, negative edge is quite good for this because you can place Eddie anywhere. But
anywhere.
also,
Yeah.
vanish into dark if you're at range 1. Advances 2.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Because I mean, unlike puppet characters like Shovel and Shield Knight or something, you don't really have a lot that moves Eddie when he's in play, and he leaves play pretty frequently. So either you're going to be moving, or you're going to be setting up a combo by canceling, where you've put them down with a a normal that has enough
Yeah,
range to get you to over here, or you're in exceed mode, and then uh, right away now you're trying to leverage this. You're not like uh,
yeah,
tightening the noose over a couple
yeah.
of
You're
turns
not
to set
bringing.
this up.
Yeah. The other thing is though that it is a hit effect. It is not a passive effect,
Right,
right? So if it was a passive effect, uh, it would just occur when damage occurs. You would check it then.
right.
But because it is a hit effect, you can order this among any hit effects. So the opponent is
Oh, you
standing on
okay?
um so something like, oh god, let me set it up. The opponent is between you and Eddie. So Eddie's here, something like this, or even uh there's a few you can set up. But something
Well,
oh,
you
this
could
is a good one.
yeah you could do something like Where's your pull? Yeah, you could do something like
Yeah, damn
damned
fang.
fang, pull him in. Now your second hit effect. There you go.
Yep, or even the other one is grasp. I've had it work with. So I can't remember how I set it up.
Well, you
There,
also
there
you.
was
I know that's an after effect, the advance your retreat one or two, so
yeah,
you can't do it that way.
that is the problem. Is a lot of his movement stuff is on after.
Right, sure.
Um, but yeah, like Pierce has hit push or pull one. So, but a lot of the time it is pretty blatant. Um,
Right,
but it's also +3 power.
right. And they might not have anything that they can do about that.
Yeah, you know,
Right.
something like we're in this position. Leap is on curve. It's going to push them towards me, but that's okay. And it's hitting for 7 because it's +3.
Sure.
Or Pierce is 6 at 6 speed with a hit push or pull 1, so sweep doesn't do anything. Because I can order it so that I get the +1 power and then I pull them out of the way.
And then you pull
+3.
them and then you gain advantage and yeah, okay. So that's and because when you're using this, you're going to be using it when Eddie is in play at all.
Yeah,
You're probably getting advantage out of it anyway, or at least
yeah,
threatening advantage.
yeah. Because you can play this, like in this positioning, assault, or
Right.
spike.
Right.
I can still play. You can still play your normals. You have like a double way mix up
Right. Now
in positions like
they're
this.
going to be really worried about your specials, but your normals all get that power. Your normals all hurt really bad too.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Makes sense.
Um, yeah. So that's the last card in his kit. That is an important source of damage for him, but it's not super hard for him to set up.
Right.
All you need is negative edge, cancel, feel a feel.
Right. And now you're threatening it at least, and they have to respond to it right now. Oh
Yeah.
no, no, I'm sorry. It's a strike. It's a now strike effect. You just do it right
Yep.
away. Okay, cool.
It it just goes off. They
Right.
just have to respond to it.
Gotcha. So it seems like we've gone through the whole kit now, and there's Eddie is incredibly flexible, right? There's a ton of different positions where you can set him up. And it seems like in general, you would prefer your opponent to be farther away than they're comfortable. You would prefer to have him in a situation where you can threaten things like Pierce and Leap and Damned Fang. You would prefer to have him over here where you can get Feel of Fear off when you're threatening it. But otherwise, other than those like very, very general rules, it seems like you can really, really play the matchup with Eddie. Like he
Y-
can go anywhere and can do what you need him to do against the opponent that you're fighting.
You do a lot of jazz. You
Yeah,
just make it up as you go. You play
you
with the tools you have.
you improv and see what your opponent has and see how you can beat them because odds are they have something that beats Pierce. Well, that's not going to beat Damned Fang, or they have something that armors through everything. Well, okay, I have +3 power now. Like, yeah, so you don't have like a
Yeah,
canonical place where Eddie always wants to be or Zato always wants to be.
I th- I think a good rule is to have Eddie between you and the opponent
Okay,
because especially if they are able to take the next turn. Because if Eddie's here and the opponent gets a turn, suddenly it's a lot less good.
right.
Whereas if the Eddie is here and the opponent's taking a next turn, that's a lot more useful. It goes from like a range 3 difference to uh, a range 1,
That makes
even
sense.
though he was at range 1 on both starting positions.
Right. Right, because yeah, and also, I mean, in this situation, you're also threatening your normals. Like you can again, you can be very flexible with how you're doing this.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, I find it is just easier to set Eddie up on the side that will be closer to you.
Yeah, when you're not exceeded, you're generally limited to where
Yeah,
your normals can even hit, and there's actually not that many normals.
with
It's
range.
right. It's spike and sweep that could
Eh,
get at you.
yeah, yeah. Cross at range 1, and
Right,
then spike and sweep.
right. Okay,
So a lot of the time, you are limited to on this side, on the near side,
right.
which I do find is just a better place to have him. I think a lot of the time when you are doing Feel or Fear, it is set up and do. Like you when that happens, you're doing that straight away.
Right.
Um, but not necessarily. There are obviously no hard and fast rules, but when a lot of the time it is, negative edge, Feel or Fear, kill them into the sun.
Right. Yeah, and there's not a lot that they can do about an incredibly threatening multi-way mix-up with +3 power that you just canceled into from nothing that you also set up with Eddie. There's
Yeah,
there's outs to that, but they need to call your mix-up, and if they're wrong, they explode.
yeah, and
Okay.
and sometimes you can just play something that just sort of doesn't lose to anything. Like in this sort of positioning, assume the opponent's not Ryu or doesn't have Shoryukens or whatever. If I
Right.
play Pierce here,
Yeah.
that's 6 power. That trades well at least with everything, and
Sure.
I'm gaining advantage.
Sure. Yeah. And now whatever they play, you can react to with your both your positioning effects and your advantage coming up.
Yeah. So
Okay.
he you can often choose to do you're in the mix up, but you can often just choose to pick an option that doesn't lose to
Right.
anything when you have Feel or Fear in play,
That makes sense. So
which
then,
is nice.
yeah, that makes sense. So, a couple other questions. So you mentioned that he builds Gauge like crazy. He builds it Gauge very easily and is spending it consistently. Maybe not on Amorphous, but he's got lots of Gauge payouts. Sometimes they're
Outlets. Yep.
sometimes they're force payouts. Sometimes they're Sun Void. Whatever. Um, in terms of force economy, do you find yourself drawing cards a lot? Do you find yourself CCing for certain options a lot? Like how do you
So
manage his hand or the hand side of the economy?
uh so I find he's got a pretty decent amount of draw in his kit, like conditional draw, consistent draw, consistent inconsistent draw, but
Yeah, but if you're hitting, you're
yeah,
you're getting it. Sure.
yeah. And then hand fixing, which
Right.
is not really draw, but it's almost better.
Right.
Uh, and then draw. Sure, okay, I
Right.
guess.
Right.
But two his two most like obviously his fastest specials are therefore his most reliable to land because he doesn't have good defensive specials.
Right.
Uh, they they both one has a conditional draw two and the other one has draw one, so that's pretty useful. I do find you'll sometimes have downturns where you've got to restock, get your value back because you are spending a fair bit.
Right.
But if you stun someone with Pierce, for example, that sets you up pretty good. That's value, especially considering you don't need to play both copies of Feel or Fear in a game. So sometimes Amorphous is just
It's just
two
force.
force.
Sure.
Yeah. So you can then use two force to turn that into two cards.
Yep.
Or yeah. So I you will probably have downturns. Obviously, I think changing cards is a lot better
Right.
because you are not get because you are less likely to get any specific option because of your deck size and comp. It can be worth. I find it's better to dig for this better cards. Like no offense to oppose, and that's a lot, but sometimes you want leap, and by sometimes I mean any day ending
Yeah.
in Y.
Most of the time, you want that card. Okay. And then we talked a little bit about the normals and how they have to play this extra role as being ways to set Eddie
Setup
up. Yeah,
tools.
so
Yep.
your range band matters even if you're not hitting frequently. Um, are there any particular like use cases between the special and or the normals and the normal boosts that we should cover, or are you pretty much using these as any other character would?
Yeah, they're pretty well standard. Obviously any power bonus because you've got range control, which is essentially speed control.
Right.
Any power bonus is a greater bonus, so that's something to look at with Badass and Let's Rock.
Right.
Um, and in particular, Let's a Grasp is kind of awkward for him because it'll only ever set Eddie at range 1, so it's a bit
Right.
So you're sometimes a bit more free to be playing Let's Rock.
Okay.
And that's another source of card draw in the kit,
Right.
draw an
Right.
extra
Right.
card.
And
Um
and because, as you mentioned, because he's generating a fair amount of gauge, that's because he's hitting, not necessarily because he gets a lot of gauge from his cards. So power bonuses on
yeah,
top of it. His attacks are fairly consistent. You might as well up the value on them by putting power on them because they're probably going to hit anyway.
yeah. And like they're not the hardest hitting cards.
Right.
So
Right.
turning that up is good.
Right.
Um Assault is another one that's a bit awkward for him. Assault and Dive have this problem. At least Grasp moves the opponent, but if you're not exceeded, the only place you can place Eddie when you hit there or
Or
there.
on top of your opponent. Yeah. And we haven't this whole time. I don't think we've mentioned a single situation where Eddie behind you is particularly important. And I feel like the only one that I'm even seeing would be, I guess, that's like threatening. That's a lot,
Mm,
but
Yeah, yeah.
that's
It's the shield boomerang consistency thing
right.
of yeah, technically it's more consistent. That works for shield boomerang because shield boomerang is a silly card.
Yeah, you can't be hit during it in most board states when you have it set up. There's nothing like that in Zato's kit. You generally want Eddie nearer to your opponent than farther away.
Yeah. And
Okay.
like yeah, doing that means that's a lot hits and technically also, leap also hits, which is nice, but like most of the time.
Yeah,
So
you
those two cards are a bit awkward.
okay.
Though you can overcome that by using Break the Law, um, by giving them that after movement. It means you can only place Eddie at range 1, but it means you're not at range 1, so
Right.
then he can be,
Right. You still
yeah.
have good threats from that situation. Okay. And but other than that, our normals, accepting the fact that we need them as defensive tools, we need them as mix-up tools because they're coming from us instead of from Eddie, even when Eddie's on the board. Um, we're using the boosts largely the same as we would for most other characters.
Yeah, it is very important to remember that they come from you.
Right.
Um, because otherwise, you're not slamming down a grasp here
Right.
thinking it hits. But also, if the opponent can break your setup in a single turn, like a big move and strike or whatever, you need options that aren't your specials. Because if they break your setup with a big move, you're very vulnerable.
Yeah. Because you have
With
very
that,
bad defensive options for pretty much everything. Uh, because Eddie is not
especially yeah, especially if Eddie's out of place.
right.
Yeah, like they're not great even with Eddie in place. Like um, stuff. There are tools that can win, but like if the opponent can get into face while you have Eddie out at range,
Right.
you're in trouble.
Yeah, you don't really have anything among your specials that can deal with that. You probably have to boost away, but really your opponent's going to get at least a free punch into you. So
Yeah,
have some good normals.
yeah, especially if the only things are like sometimes that's a value of that's a lot because it's guarded
Right.
and it hits at range and it has a movement on it. So like at least if they initiate at the they've come in and they initiate here. That's a lot might not get stunned and it might allow you to reposition at least.
But now
But
you're
yeah,
to your point though, you're playing to your loss here. You're not this is not what you would like to be doing with this card.
no,
Okay.
this is worst case.
Right.
You got to survive.
Right. That's actually probably a pretty good segue into unless there's more about the kit that you want to cover into counterplay if
No,
we want to
no, let's go to counterplay.
perfect. So yeah, we tend to end these lessons with you've just described all the Zato things. My opponent, who's very competent, knows all the Zato things and they know how to stop them. What are they doing, and how can Zato mitigate that?
All right. So what they're gonna be doing is making Eddie as awkward as possible.
Okay.
Uh, the He's your greatest strength, but also he is if you are not doing something with him immediately, that's a weakness that can be overturned. You know,
Right.
because they know where they're coming from, and it's a disjoint, so they can make it so that that disjoint is a punishment.
They can look at
Uh,
what's in your remaining options and say, "Oh, none of these hit in this one board state. I'll just go here."
yeah, or go, yep,
Right.
I'm on Eddie. My worst case is I'm getting hit for 3.
Right.
But yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing they might do is boost a lot of stats.
Yep.
Uh, you don't have a lot. Season 7 characters in general don't have a lot of stats because cancels are cancels. So if your opponent has a lot of stats available to them, they can use those. Couple ways around that. You've got your tech, obviously, but also because you have your recursion, you have more access to EXs. Um, so EXs are a way to handle extra stats
Right.
accompanied with your disjointed effects,
Right.
you know. Um, and just positioning. Position. You know what your opponent has available to them, what is good where, and if you know what is good where, you can punish that probably
Okay.
if you're in the right spots, you know.
And and do you ever find, so when your opponent is consistently able to play around Eddie, is it more valuable to exceed in that situation so you have finer control, or is it more just like, okay, now I've got to make better use of the threats I do have rather than just put
So
Eddie anywhere?
so I find that if the opponent is consistently able to turn Eddie off, being able to put him anywhere probably won't help because anywhere isn't exactly useful. You
Oh,
know
because
what I mean?
my,
There's
my
only a hand.
my threats are still my threats. They're
Yeah,
put like it's, oh yeah, they can't get to him here, but that doesn't help me.
yeah. There's only a handful of ranges that Eddie will be consistently useful in.
Right.
It's like two, like range two to range two of the opponent,
Right.
like two
And
in front and then one behind.
and sometimes depending on what's in your deck, ignoring the space they're actually in.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's only a limited number of spaces. So and a lot of the time you can be placing him with negative edge. So you
Right.
already have that control over where you're placing him.
That makes sense. Okay.
So if the opponent is consistently able to turn Eddie off, I would think about accelerating your game plan. So taking less time to give them a chance to do it.
Okay.
So do stuff to get things in your gauge and use your negative edge to play Eddie and do something immediately.
Immediately before they have a chance. That also probably is that's probably how you deal with some stat boosting things too, where you're responding to
Yeah,
that with action compression with advantage turns. You take 3 turns in a row, so they couldn't boost during any
yeah,
of them.
yep.
Okay.
Stuff like Still in the Dark is also a really nice tool. If the opponent is, turning off Eddie by standing on him or whatever, you can
Right.
out of nowhere make it so no, they're not.
Right.
Um, there's also the point of empty crosses aren't bad for you. I mean, they're not bad for anyone if you're using them correctly.
Okay.
But for you in particular, you have greater value to them because they allow you to position Eddie.
Right. In a lot of
So,
different inflexible places. Right.
yeah. So it can be a good idea to, if the opponent is boosting stats, if they're manipulating position, empty cross can get you out of that space. And if they're controlling positioning really well, break the law is a good tool to mess with that. A fun one I know of. So sweep at range 3. You initiate sweep at range 3. The opponent plays sweep it, whatever they play in response, as long as it's not spike and dive.
Right.
If they play assault, you with Break the Law. So now you have positional control afterwards. And it's a 1 to 3 attack, so you can put Eddie in a lot of places.
Pretty much
Fantastic.
anywhere. Yeah.
They play sweep in response. You hit them for 6, and you can place Eddie, and you can get it out safely.
Right.
So Break the Law can help you control positioning and avoid damage in strikes where you probably shouldn't be able to. Which is a good way to, if the opponent is exerting a lot of positional control, to sort of overturn that.
Right. Okay. And obviously, if they're also threatening big stats, you mentioned empty cross, so you can nope out, you can not care about what they're doing, but that also break the law also lets you. You mentioned grasp.
Yep.
If their speed is so high that you can't even cross out, you can grasp out and dodge that way if you have to.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
not ideal, but
Right.
things are not guaranteed to be ideal.
Sure, yeah, and so you win by being tricky with your movement, being tricky with your positioning, not necessarily by matching them with your own stats or your own
Y-
threats.
Yeah. You
Okay,
you're not gonna win as Zato by trying to be the bigger, stronger character.
right,
You don't want to get into that like war sort of thing. You
right,
just want to basically not engage with the opponent. You want to turn off their ability to play the game as much as possible
makes
by
sense.
doing
And
controlling position, disjoints, advantage,
yeah,
all
and you
things that stop them.
and when you're doing that, you're it feels really really oppressive to be on the other end of it.
Yes.
Okay,
The way to manage now, in saying that, it's not easy. There is resource management. There, you got to consider what threats you have available, what the cards in your hand literally do, because each different hand can result in different plays.
sure,
So
sure,
you gotta be careful. Like from this position, if I have like still in the if I have Pierce and Leap in hand, I can end up at range 4 by Still in the Dark, push, cancel, leap, boost, leap, which, that's +1 power, +1 speed. I'm at range 4, and I have Eddie at range 2.
right. And you have plenty of options to uh to throw out at range 4 unless your hand's full of normals, in which case maybe don't do that play in the first place. Like you
Yeah,
need to you your your threats are contingent on what's in your hand. So before you start, like, don't do any like canned plays, like be
yeah,
reactive, play jazz, as you were saying.
yeah. He doesn't have preemptive spike.
Sure.
You know, a lot of his kit lacks outright just blind good plays. The only one that springs to mind is like leap at range 3.
Right, that's just kind of a button you can press safely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, though don't be afraid to play his specials as EXs because you have that recursion.
You can always get them back, and you're looking for that damage, you're looking for any sort of additional consistency you can get, so we take those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Invite Hell also benefits a lot from, in particular, being EX'd if you're playing it as an attack. I probably wouldn't play both copies because Negative Edge is useful even with
Right.
the recursion.
Right.
But badass.
Badass
Now
into
you're
invite hell. Right.
Yeah. If you have Eddie in play, this is 6 power at speed 5, and it gains you advantage, and it draws you a card.
Yeah, that
Just
is a ton of value.
Yeah, it's good. That's the sort of thing you would do off a reactive play. You've done something on your opponent's strike you've set Eddie on the opponent's strike.
Right.
Would
That makes sense.
uh, and a lot of your strongest plays are off that. You know,
You're
take
setting up on defense. Your opponent is striking into you, and you're taking advantage of that, and then your turn is spent cashing out.
Yeah,
Okay.
or which is the same principle really as the set up and do something immediately.
Right.
Just turns where you can not give your opponent a chance to respond, whether you set up on their turn or you use your cancel to
Or
make
you
it happen.
advantage chain from your previous turn.
Yeah,
Okay.
anything like that is very strong. Um, yeah, he's a tricky character to play. There's no sugarcoating it. By not having good defensive tools and not a lot of stats, he is hard to play.
That makes sense. And I mean that's true to source. So but people who are picking him up because they like uh they like his vibe, maybe don't expect to succeed with him without a little bit of lab work first. Like get your reps in. He's tricky, but
Yeah,
he
he's a
sounds very
puppet
rewarding.
character.
Yeah, they're always
They're
kind
all
of hard.
tricky.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Okay. And he's a resource management character on top of that, and he's a he's an action compression character on top of that. He's got a lot of moving parts to him.
yeah. He's got a abnormal deck composition.
Right. All right.
Mm.
Well, if that's it, I think I've definitely learned a ton. Reggie, is there anything else you wanted to cover?
I'm trying to think. If you're looking for characters like him, there's
Oh, sure.
always the other puppet characters. Your your Carl Clovers, your Shovel and Shield Knights,
Right. Even
your
chaos to an extent. Where is he? There's chaos.
yeah, Chaos. Lychee, I actually think is a really good comparison.
Okay, that
She's
makes
an
sense.
advantage chain puppet character that changes the position of a puppet strike to strike.
Right.
So, um, and then if you like the action compression thing, all of season 7,
Pretty much. Yeah.
uh, yeah, just doing their things. And advantage chain characters are for the bad guys, just the villainous stuff.
Yep. And by playing them, you become a villain yourself.
Yeah,
Yep.
but yeah, no, he's he's a complicated character. He is a lot of work. Uh, but when you do well with him, you do feel like you've done well.
Okay.
Like because you've worked towards it, you feel it feels rewarding.
Well, that makes sense. And
But
I
yeah,
mean, like that is there's a reason. There's definitely a reason to play a difficult character when an easier character would do. Like
yeah,
if you're, that's not to say that he can't win or that uh he's not a strong character, but on top of the dopamine hit of beating your opponent, you also solved the puzzle of Zato, and that's valuable in itself.
yeah. He's a bit of a brain burner. But yeah, I don't think I have any more feedback, any more advice. I don't see a lot of people playing him. I'd love to see more people play uh, Zato. I think he's really cool. I think Leap is a reason enough to play him.
Right? You just want
Uh,
to mash this button over and over again.
it's headbutt. It's like headbutt.
Right?
Is
Why would you not?
yeah. It's just a cracked card.
Hey, you're right.
But yeah.
It even can gain advantage like headbutt can. You're right. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It, it's headbutt, but it doesn't lose to focus because you play it at range 3.
Yep. Yeah. All right.
Uh,
Everyone watching, play Leap. I mean Zato. Uh, you know, all the other cards too, but mostly play Zato in order to play Leap. Hopefully you all learned something. I certainly did. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. And Reggie, more importantly, thank you for your time and your expertise.
you're all good. Thanks for having me again.
Of course, absolutely. Happy to do it.
I'm trapped in his basement. His address is.
Yep.
No, no,
And
no, no. They're
and then
coming. They're
quickly ends the call. All right, folks. Thanks again. I will see you all for the next one. Bye, everybody.